So if you notice there was a site maintenance button there and now it's gone, if you have that site maintenance button, that's the way you know you're a multi-sided sponsoring organization. If all you have is this applications button, then you're single-sided, and when we get to that part at the end for those sponsor folks, you single-sided people don't have to stay if you choose not to. Okay, so to locate your application for anyone that's in here, you'll have at least one application. You're brand new, any that are brand new, I went ahead and created the 2021 application so that I could go ahead and house some of the documents that you've sent us. So you'll click on 2021. Our fiscal year in CACFP runs from October to September. So we're a few months into this fiscal year already. You always want to leave these dates alone. You have the ability to change them, but you shouldn't. So don't ever change those up there. That's just, even though you're starting October 1, that's just stating what our fiscal year is. So it will kind of mess up the order of the application. If you guys can make sure you stay muted unless you have a question, I would appreciate it. Thank you. Okay, so the first form that everyone has is the application questionnaire. Pretty simple. It basically just asks, has anyone in your institution ever done any of these things, basically that indicates a lack of business integrity? We hope not, but if so, you have to let us know and who those folks are and have them here. We also need to know if you or anyone involved in your institution or your center or your school has ever participated in any of our other programs. So many of you brand new ones may not, or you may have at a previous center. If you're here, I think we've got a couple of folks maybe from a school. You're going to need to mark that, yeah, you do National School Lunch or what have you. You need to mark whether or not anyone's been terminated. So if you're a multi-sided institution, I've already probably discussed with you, and maybe we haven't gotten there yet, about the national disqualified list. Anybody that comes on our program, you guys have already I've already checked the list to make sure each and every one of you weren't on it. Because if you've ever done anything that has indicated a lack of business integrity in any of these programs where federal dollars are received, you could be terminated and disqualified from participating in the future for 7 years. So there's a big USDA national disqualified list that we have to search and make sure that you folks aren't on it. So if you've ever been terminated, you're not qualified, you're disqualified for participating, but none of you are. You multi-sided folks, for all of your sites, when you bring on new people, you're responsible for searching that list for them. And there are instructions in the resource library how to do that under the multi-sided section. And like I said, if you're single-sided, no worries. But here's the instructions for any multi-sided people. Okay. We need to know if you owe money to any other agency. And then number 5 is if you participate in any of these other things. Many of you are Title 20. If it doesn't apply, just say NA and submit and move on. This is a pretty easy form. Any questions? I see someone asked if you filled this one out, is there a way to see if I've received it? Yeah, I can. I'll go back and take a look at anyone's once you get stuff submitted. That's part of the application process. You're a new one. So when we get to that point, I'll let you know if anything needs to be corrected and if we've gotten it. Funds received. This is a pretty easy form. Most of you, if you're brand new, you probably aren't going to have a total funds received. And what we're asking for is the funds received of this full year's worth of funds received for your prior fiscal year. So whatever your fiscal year is, even though our fiscal year for this program is October to September, it doesn't necessarily mean that's how you operate your business. So when you're reporting things to us like here or on your budget, and we're asking for your budget or your fiscal year, if you run on a January to December or what have you schools, you do June to July. I said that backwards, July to June. whatever your fiscal year is, that's what we need you to report to us. So many of you in here, it's going to be $0 on this one for right now. Total other federal funds received, that would include your Title 20, any title money if you're a school. Title 20 is your DHS subsidy. If we have any tribes in here that's receive any type of tribal funding, that's all included in this one, and you need to report that here. Date of last audit. Generally, people don't will put a date in here and think we're asking for one thing. A lot of times, especially our folks that are doing renewals, will think we're asking for the date that we last audited you, but that's not what we're looking for here. It's regulatory, it's USDA regulation that if you receive $750,000 or more in a year of federal funds from any combined funding, that you're required to have an independent organizational audit. Many of our participants, you don't ever go past that threshold. So if this amount and this amount added together does not exceed $750,000, you do not have to have an independent organizational audit. A lot of our larger tribes and our nonprofits and our schools, a lot of those do, but generally a lot of our centers don't cross that threshold. And so you would just put in the dollar amount you received and leave this blank. You don't need a date here. And then submit and go to the next form. Any questions on that one? Meal policy statement, everybody has that one. This one's pretty simple. You have to read it and you have to agree to it, and that's it. Civil rights assurance. This is another one that you got to read through all this. You'll find our civil rights statement on just about everything we put out. You're also required to have that statement on any materials that you might put out that has anything to do with the food program. In addition, like if you create something that we don't, but generally you guys won't need to create anything because we make all the forms you need anyhow. So on this form, you'll need to read through it, click next page, and then complete page 2. It's really, none of our programs really should require a specific membership. It really should be enrolled children if you're a center. And then we do have some at-risk in here, maybe just 1 or 2. And if you don't know what at-risk is, then don't listen, just close your ears, it doesn't apply to you. But your at-risk is technically open. So you wouldn't want to require a specific membership. We need to know how, what efforts you do to reach out to the community to advertise and work with other local entities. You have to say whether or not, if you had any non-compliances with the Civil Rights Act of 1964. We hope that's no for everyone. And then number 5 here, it's just an attestation statement stating that you have taken your civil rights training before you click this box and say you have. So if you have not had your civil rights training yet, that's also found in the resource library. I never can find it. Well, it's in here. It's in your OK Edge. There it is. So if you've not taken your civil rights training, I think many of you have already. Go in there. It's a self-paced one, won't take much time at all. But anybody that has anything to do with this program, even if it's your teachers who serve a meal, they have to have the civil rights training. They don't necessarily have to go on to OK Edge and do it. Like if you want to, as the owner or director or the program director, take the training yourself and then take our information and provide the training yourself to a group of your staff, that's acceptable too. Just make sure you're keeping you know, an agenda per se of when the training took place and a sign-in sheet of who all had the training, because This attestation statement states that you understand everyone has to have that, and that you will maintain that documentation on file, because that is one thing we look at when we come out for an administrative review. Your consultant will look for that. So you could be in non-compliance if you're not maintaining that and doing it on a yearly basis. Number 6 and 7 are there just to help us identify if there's any materials or any languages that are spoken that we're not meeting the needs of. So if you speak anything, well, it asks you to indicate even if it's just English. So let us know. Most of our materials we already have in Spanish because that's what we need the most of, but we have the ability to go and retrieve anything in other languages if needed. So we just need you to indicate if that need is there. Submit the form, and that's it on this one. I think we do have some that were with us that aren't brand new. Last year with our civil rights, we did ask that you submit us the certificate of, the civil rights training certificate before we'd approve your application. That's not required on renewals, but brand new folks, when you're first coming on, we do have to see that. So several of you have already gotten them from. So if you're brand new, any of these trainings that you're doing, send me your certificates when you get done if you're doing the self-paced ones. Public release. Everyone has to do or participate in the public release. And that's just a federal requirement, just stating what your program is and when it's available. So for a brand new one, it is required that you actually complete the public release form. I don't know if you can see that. I clicked on it. Hold on. So when you click on that hyperlink that I did, it will bring up this form. You actually have to complete that, or something of its kind that you can create on your own that just states these same things with our discrimination statement. And you have to send it to some type of publication and ask that it be published. Whether it's the newspaper. Am I back on the right screen now? Yeah, okay. So, or it could even be a radio or what have you. The easiest way that you can prove to us that you've actually sent it, because you're not required to pay for it, because sometimes that can be pricey. So you're just required to send it to some type of media publication and ask that it be posted. So I suggest you fill out that form and you send it to your local whatever paper, what have you, and just ask if they can publish it. Whether or not they do is up to them, but that email that where you sent it and requested it is what we need for verification that you've done that. And then you'll fill out this form and just put, if you don't have a release date, obviously you don't know, you can just put the date that you sent it and who it was sent to and send that proof to me that you've done it, and that suffice for this. And then every year when you renew, you have the ability to opt in to our statewide release. So all you newbies next year, when you renew your application in October, there'll be a box, I think it appears right here. And you can just click it if you choose and say, yep, I want to do that. And so every year after we get done with our applications, we print up a big list, we send it to our communications, and they send it out to wherever it goes. So you're automatically on a release, and you don't ever have to really worry about it again unless you want to. So this form's pretty simple. You just got to do a little legwork before you fill it out, and then you submit it, and that's it. State agency institution agreement. There's really not much to do on this other than an incredible amount of reading. And I really suggest that you print this off now and every year, because it is a living document, meaning that this agreement, it's permanent. As long as you're in the program and you're participating, you're agreeing to whatever this says. But we are making changes throughout the years. So what it says today might have been different than what it said last year. So I would suggest every year upon application renewal, printing this off so you have in black and white a copy of what you've agreed to do and what we've agreed to do for you. It is pretty lengthy, but it has all of our policies, all of the, everything based on USDA regulation of what's expected in this program. And we're not going to go through all that because, like I said, it's pretty lengthy. There's several pages. It goes through your meal patterns and all that, talks about record keeping. And there is stuff in here that doesn't necessarily apply to everyone. It had even adult meal patterns in it too. But you do have to go to the last page and submit and say you understand. Pretty simple, but I would suggest always reading through it. Once this form is submitted and approved, it's always approved because it's a permanent agreement. So unless something happens and you decide you want to leave the program, or unfortunately you're terminated and you become disqualified, that will always remain approved with your, initial effective date, whenever that's determined. Owner and board members page. This one's pretty easy, but it trips some folks up. It's not very common that we have an entity that has both an owner and board members, but if that's the case, please fill it out accordingly. Most of our centers are just going to have an owner and maybe a co-owner, so make sure you list all those people. And then if you have a board, they go down here. Many of you, if not all of you, I think, have endured or are enduring the VCA checklist document. That's a relatively new process that we started. So back in the summer, we adopted a new policy that we're going to be doing this VCA checklist for all of our brand new applicants. And then for other reasons, eventually everyone should be doing it, but we're kind of phasing it in. A board is not mandatory. A board is only mandatory for a private nonprofit or if you're an incorporated entity. So if you become incorporated as a business, then yes, you have to have one. But an LLC, a lot of times folks get confused and think LLC means you're incorporated. It's not. That's just basically has to do with insurance and limited liability type of thing. You're probably just going to have an owner and a co-owner at the most. But what I was going to say on that VCA, if you do have a board or whoever your owners are, there is that page in the VCA where you completed board members / for-profit officers. Whatever you put there needs to match here. So if your VCA has already been approved or it hadn't been approved yet, and we get to that point where I'm approving one or the other, I'm going to double check and make sure that those things match. So make sure your things can change. So if something changes between the time you fill out the VCA and you do this, just make sure it's updated. It is required, and as many of you know, because we talked about on the VCA, the date of birth is required. And that's mostly, if not 100%, so that we can make sure we're identifying the right folks, especially when there is an issue and you do become seriously deficient or terminated from the program. When we put those folks on the NDL, the National Disqualified List, we have to include a birth date. And it's required that we get it up front because it's pretty hard to get something from someone at the tail end of stuff when they know they're in trouble. So make sure you include everything on here and that it's true and accurate. And then submit the form. Another thing on the board though, a board has to have at least 3 members. So just FYI. And something else I should mention. No more than 49% can be related or receiving compensation. So make sure if you have a board that they're not, more than half of them have to be unrelated to the entity. Disclosure of lobbying activities. I'm not really going to say much about this one. You do not have a co-owner, but you have a director. Then just list the one owner. If it's a sole owner, that's all you'll need on there. We can put the director in a different place. The disclosure of lobbying activities. I don't really know of anyone that does this. Every once in a while, we might have a big, huge nonprofit like food bank or something that may do lobbying, but generally nobody does this. But we still have this form that you have to complete. Well, you don't have to complete anything in the form. You have to go down here and complete this portion and submit it. You're preparing it, but there's no information to insert. So just enter that there, submit, and move on. Clear as mud? Okay. Application for for participation. Everybody has this form in one way or another. If you're single-sided, you're just going to have this one. For those of you that have multiple sites, when I go and make the change to the application, you'll see that it'll show up with however many sites you have. But the application itself, this form looks the same. And this is where some of the most important information needs to go about how you operate on a daily basis. So if anything on this form, like your meal times, things like that, ever change, you need to go and update it. Our consultants in our office rely on this information to be able to conduct our reviews. And so our reviews, when we come out to do an administrative review or an audit, are unannounced. So if you say you operate from this time to this time on these days, and these are your serving times, and we come out there at 11:30 on a Monday to come observe a lunch, you need to be serving lunch at that time. And if that ever changes, you need to go and update this form. So like you asked Monique, this is where you would put your director. That name doesn't really apply. We might have some schools in here and you don't really have a director, but that would be like your kitchen manager or something. The person at the site, if I'm going to a site and I'm looking for the person who runs that show, that's the person who needs to be listed here. Let's see, so are you licensed? Most of you are going to be licensed, but if you're someone in here, I think we have one that's an at-risk. If you are not, this is really just talking about licensed or DHS for childcare. If you are someone that is not, don't put yes, obviously put no. But most of you in here are yes. Some of this is already going to be filled out for you because it's kind of auto-populated from stuff we already have in the system. But if not, make sure you're selecting the right thing, whether you're proprietary Title 20, or if you don't do DHS subsidy. If you don't already know, if you hadn't had the other training about administrative and whatever that other training's called, to qualify for the program, you have to have at least 20%ers. You have to have at least 25% of your children that are Title 20 or free and reduced per the applications, the income applications. So many of our centers are Title 20 and many of you do qualify based on that. Just make sure you're selecting the right thing. None of you in here are going to be operating in any other state. Most of you in here are going to be none of the above. I think we've got a public school in here, but the rest of you, if you're just a daycare center, that's not a private school. You would just be none of the above. And then you're going to select which one of these that apply to you. Most of you in here, like I said, are childcare, so this will be the only one you select. A lot of times folks misunderstand what this selection is. Outside school hours care. You would think, oh, I keep kids outside of school hours, but that doesn't apply to many people in our state. What that's really for is generally an unlicensed facility that only cares for children when school is not in session. So we might have some schools that do that because they do before and after school care, or say a 4-day-a-week. We have districts that are only open 4 days a week, but they still provide some kind of care on that 5th day to help parents. That's what that is. Most of you don't need to select that. We do have one at-risk person in here. This is the one that you'll select and fill all that out. And if you're unsure of what that needs to be, I'll work with you. We'll get that figured out. Your age of enrolled participants. I would suggest putting the age of the potential. You might not have children all the way up to 13 enrolled, but just like with your child care, like you can claim kids up until the day they turn 13. 0 to 12 basically is the age for CACFP. At risk, it goes older to your 18-year-olds. But for the majority of you, you're a center, you're licensed for those age children. I wouldn't just put what you have enrolled because it might change. So like I said, I would just put 0 to, if you take infants, 0 to 12 or what have you. Your license capacity needs to match what your license says, unless you're not licensed. And when you select this and put no, it will default to 0. But 99% of you guys in here are licensed and do have a capacity. Hours of operation, everything here has to be in military time. That's just the way the system's set up. So if you're not familiar with, this will explain to you how to enter that. But make sure that you list your hours of operation, and if they ever need updated, this is where you need to come back and do it. Your dates of operation, you really don't, many of you don't really know. I think all of you in here really are new. You don't really know your start date quite yet, so you can just put a date. You can put today's date. Whenever we get your approval date, we'll come back and adjust it for you. But your end date should be 9/30 of 2021. And every year after this, when you renew, make sure you always put 10/1 of whatever the current year is, current fiscal year, to 9/30, because that makes you eligible for the entire year. List your numbers, days of week, and weeks per year. Do you serve meals in shifts? So what this is asking is, do you have a separate serving of breakfast or a separate serving of lunch or what have you? Not, you have to actually have a separate serving time. And generally this is for when you guys have, say, a group of kids that come in and have breakfast, and then they leave and go to school and you have a new group of kids come in. Or if you operate in the evenings or overnight, you might have a group of kids that eat supper at one time, and then your evening kids come in and you serve them. So many folks really truly don't have shift meals. For each one of your meal times, you can claim up to your maximum capacity. So this isn't, shifts aren't intended so that you can claim over your capacity. You truly have to have a separate serving time. If you do, you need to explain why. F, you will see, you can't see anything. We take care of this in the office. It has all the months here, and we'll check which months you're approved for. Section 3, number 1 has to be yes. You have to maintain your records on site on a daily basis. So that's your meal counts, your attendance, things like that. So that has to be yes. Number 2 is asking, how are you going to take your meal counts? Most of you are just going to say, you know, as you serve, or as they come through the line, or however you serve your meal. But that we need to know, when you're recording how many meals you're going to claim, how are you doing that? And this section here is where you'll put your meal times. So I'll show you how to do that. These are also in military time. And generally, you would put the maximum number of meals is going to be, we suggest you put what your enrollment is, because sometimes your enrollment can exceed your license capacity. So you need to put whatever your license capacity or your enrollment is here. Yeah, there's lots of edits in here that if you're not, got to put in the hours of operation. All right. So now I have a breakfast entered. And if you've noticed that it had to be within your hours of operation, and also had to match your license, or it couldn't exceed your license capacity. Did I say that right? I may have just told y'all wrong. Yeah, it doesn't let you exceed the license capacity. So you really should just put your license capacity or your current enrollment. Any questions on that? You can have any of these meals, but each child can only be served a certain combination of meals. And well, they can only be claimed a certain combination of meals per day. So if you haven't had the meal patterns training yet, you may not have heard that, or if you're not familiar. You can offer every one of these meals, but for centers, you can only claim each child for 2 main meals and a snack, or 2 snacks and a main meal per day. For our at-risk people, I think yeah, she's still here. You can only do a meal and a snack. So like I said, most of you are going to offer and serve more meals than what you can claim. It's up to you to make sure you're only claiming the maximum amount. With the beginning of meals, do the children have to be there before start time? Well, so something I didn't really mention And especially if you've ever been in childcare before, or if you've ever been a family daycare home before, we've kind of always said that meal time should be about 30 minutes. And there's really not any regulation that say how long, and we don't tell you how long. So they have to be a reasonable length of time. And so if you want your breakfast to be from 9 to 10, that's fine. As long as the child is there within that time, recorded as being in attendance within that time. And there's a reasonable amount of time that, I mean, even if they only get there a few minutes before, you can still, they just have to be served before the ending. That doesn't mean you have to clear off the table and they have to be done when the meal time's over. So as long as they're recorded as being there in attendance before the meal time is over, they can eat the meal and you can claim it. Does that answer your question, Kayla? Okay. Section B is just for comments. So if there's anything extra we need to know about that you feel like we've missed that would be helpful for us to know about the site, put it here. Specifically, if for your centers, it's not hard. We walk in, we know who we're looking for, we know where they eat. But if you're an at-risk or a school and you just have one area where you're serving these meals, if we walk into the front desk and say, I'm looking for this program and they're serving this meal, and those people don't even know, I can't tell you how many times I've come into a building in a school and they're like, we don't know what you're talking about. So if you need to direct us specifically to a room or the door to go in, tell us there, just so it helps our consultants know who we're looking for and where to go. You have to indicate whether or not you're a private nonprofit. We've probably already established that if you are or not, because you have to submit your 501c3. This is redundant. We've already asked that, but if you said yes, you've participated in another one of our programs on that first form, this needs to be yes here. And then you would just say CACFP, and you can just give a general like 2012. Doesn't have to be specific. And also list the name of where you participated with. So if you were working with another center, put that center's name, just so we can track who goes where and whatnot. It's required. Indicate whether or not you have a Head Start program. D, you really should only select one of these 5 things here, because you really would only have one type of meal preparation per site. Most of you are going to be preparing your meals there on site. If you have multiple sites, you might have a central location where you make all the meals and then take them to each one of your sites. Or if you're under contract with any type of school or vendor or what have you, or any other outside company, you would have to have a specific agreement. And I don't think many of you this applies to. I think we have one in the group that it does. And we'll get what we need from you. But most of you, you're making your meals there on site, and that's what you'll pick. This one here doesn't really apply to your meal service. We just kind of stuck this in here because we needed a place for it to be. But if you're contracted with anyone outside of your business or outside of your organization that's doing any type of consulting or helping you with any type of administrative duties, like your paperwork, your application, you need to have a contract with them. If you're paying them using CACFP funds, it's allowable, but there has to be certain agreements and contracts in place for you to be able to pay folks like that to do administrative responsibilities. No, that's Brightwheel. I'm assuming that's like ProCare. Is that like what your parents use and how you keep track of your kids when they're come and go and finances and all that? Like, okay. So like if it's something you're using and you're entering it and the owners are responsible for the data input, that's not what we're talking about. But you can use CACFP funds when you start receiving them. You can use a portion of them to help pay for those fees. We can't pay for all of it. But if you have a reasonable amount, you can use funds to pay for it. But I'm talking like, say you have an individual that runs a company and comes in and says, I can help you with all these things. You have to have a contract with that individual. This is where you'll put your number of enrolled participants. And then this is for for-profit sites only. It's kind of like what I was rambling on about earlier, whether or not you're Title 20 or you're free reduced. This is where you'll indicate how many you have of each, and it will calculate that, yes, you are eligible, because you have to have 25% of one or the other. If any of you in here are nonprofit or you aren't a center, then this part does not apply to you. This section is a little bit confusing how to enter it because you have two areas where we want you to enter your folks who do program related duties. And then down here, we want you to enter the ones that have administrative duties. You have to have at least one person listed with administrative duties. And the way that you can tell, so now I'm going to enter the site assistant, and she does daily meal counts. There's no administrative flag because I entered them up here. But I'm gonna come down here and do the administrator, and I'm gonna add them. Now we have the flag. If you only have one person who does everything, whatever you call them, it doesn't matter what you call them, the director, the owner, what have you, we have to have at least one person that does the paperwork and oversees, you know, all that and does the claims per site. You don't have to have the other one, they can do it all. But you gotta at least have one person that has this flag here. Does that make sense? Okay, section E is your ethnic racial makeup. This top section is your actual enrollment. So if you have 20 enrolled, these two numbers, Hispanic and not Hispanic, should add up to be 20. And then you also have to break it down by race. So all of these 5 races also have to equal 20. So everyone has an ethnicity and everyone has a race. And according to USDA, unfortunately, in this situation, you can only be one of the 5 races provided. So use your best judgment and indicate which one the child belongs in. Doesn't make a lot of sense, but that's what they want us to do, so we'll do it. The bottom section is not your actual enrollment. This is for your potential eligibles in your area. So you can go to like the Census Bureau and get it online. That's kind of a pain. The easiest way to do this is to contact your local school district and ask them what their low income breakdown is. Or if you have a hard time getting someone with the school to help you out, just call us. We have that information too, and we can find you the information you need to put in there. And the very last section is the another attestation statement about training. So before you do this, and you say, yes, everyone that's involved with this site has to have the training on all these required topics. So all the trainings, if you're brand new and I've given you the training packets, all those ones that I've marked that you need to train will cover the ones you need for the type of organization you are. So make sure you get those trainings before you submit these. Any questions on this form? This is probably going to be one of the forms that you need to come back and you will be updating the most as meal times change, or maybe your license capacity, things like that. You could always come back and change it. Just make sure when you do need to update something throughout the year, you got to save it and resubmit it and make sure it gets approved, because if it goes unapproved, then you won't be able to claim. So it'll hold you up. I always suggest, even though we get alerts in our system, everyone who works on site needs to get trained. Yeah. Anybody not works on site, but anyone that would have any type of CFP responsibility. So you got a janitor and a bus driver and what have you that don't do anything with the food program, don't worry about them. I forgot what I was saying. It'll come back to me. Okay, so we don't have anybody in here that's an adult daycare, so none of you need to fill this out. Just don't even open it up and don't fill anything out. This is specifically for adult daycare centers. We have one in here that's an at-risk. So I'm speaking to that one person alone, Miss Webster, if you're here. This form needs to be completed. Everybody else, just ignore me for a second. Really, you just have to make sure that 3 and 4 do say yes, and you explain for each site what the activities are. For at-risk, you have to have an enrichment or educational program. COVID kind of threw a kink in things, so answer it how you would in a non-COVID world. So tell us what that enrichment program would be. Okay. So if you are multi-sited and you had that site maintenance button, you might have a different form up here we haven't gone over called the sponsoring organization form, and you may not have this one. So if you do not have this form, just hang on for a second because we're going to go over this for the ones that are independent. So if you're just a single-sided center, this is the administrative budget you're going to have. It is a confusing form, and we really hope in the new year, next year, we make some changes to it to make it make a little more sense for everyone. But this is what we got for now. So budget year, that's what I was talking about earlier. The budget year is your year. It doesn't have to be our year, our fiscal year. It's just, you know, whatever, when you do your taxes or what have you, what is your business fiscal year? That's what we want. The most confusing part of this budget is the administrative part, because we break down our expenses between administrative and operational cost. So administrative costs would be those that are just those that have to do with doing applications or claims or clerical type work. Operational costs are going to be your food cost, the salaries you're paying for food, what we call food service salaries. So that's your cook, that's your teachers if you want to pay a portion of their time to serve meals. The only people you're going to put up here and a portion of their information and their salary that you could use our money to pay for those costs would be those that are doing anything it's an administrative duty, paperwork, claims, what have you. Generally, most of you is going to be the director, maybe assistant director. Not many have anything in other, but if you have questions about who you can and who you should or shouldn't include up here, just ask me and I'll help you out. But as a rule of thumb, so you're gonna enter the salary, and then the center portion means how much of their salary is your center gonna pay for, and then how much of our funds, what percentage of our funds is gonna pay for that salary. As a rule of thumb, we don't really approve more than 20% of their salary to be, you can't use more than you can't pay for more than 20% of their salary with our funds. Unless you can really prove that that person spends that much time and you've done some type of time audit to show they really have spent that much time or do spend that much time, 20% is pretty generous. So the one thing that's confusing though about how this budget works and how your payment works and all that, the fact is you get paid a meals times rate. So when you get approved and you go and you enter your claim, you enter a number of claim or a number of meals and your number of free, reduced, and not eligibles, and it calculates your payment based on that. There is no separate payment for administrative cost or all these things that you're putting in your budget. It's up to you to how you spend your money. What this budget is just simply a projection of, okay, I just got $5,000 in payment from us, right? And you need to go buy your groceries. And you go buy your groceries and you buy your food related things. And say you have at the end of the day, $1,000 of it left over. You can use that leftover money to pay for these things in your projected budget. You're not going to get payment on top of what you're going to get for your reimbursement for meals if it's in here. This is just what you will be allowed to pay for if you have money left over at the end of the month after you've bought your food service stuff. So if it's not in here and you go to try to do your budgeting and you're allocating and writing off what you're using our money, how you're spending our money, it won't be allowed in a review if it's not in your budget. And so one of the regulations of this program is that you have to run a nonprofit food service program. Now, your business itself may be for profit, but this program has to be in a nonprofit status, meaning you need to spend everything that we pay you, and it has to only be on allowable costs. Does that make sense? So just because it's in here doesn't mean maybe you'll have the funds to pay for it, especially maybe not right at the beginning. If you're a brand new little center and you're just getting started, it may not happen. You may spend way more in food cost than what you get back in reimbursement sometimes, unfortunately. So back to your administrative costs, you're going to put those people that are only doing office work here. And this is your administrative expenses. Mileage, you can put your shopping, that would be considered, you can have part of that in here. Most of you don't do site reviews, so that doesn't apply to you. But any of these things are allowable costs, and you will put the total annual amount and how much center pays for and how much you would like for CSCFP funds to pay for. And then you'll save it. Part B is where we enter the food service people, like I mentioned earlier, and then also your food purchases. So your cook, your teachers, and so one way to figure it up on your teachers, if you have 8 teachers and they serve meals in the classroom 3 times a day, we generally say that about 2 hours a day would be a reasonable amount of time. So whatever 2 times 8 times however many days for the month times their hourly rate, that would be the amount that would be an allowable cost that you could use our funds to pay for their salaries. That's just an example. A lot of this, you brand new folks, it's just a guesstimation. So you're just going to guess as best as you can what should go here. And then you'll save your estimated operational costs. Part C is where you're going to record your sources of income. So not only do we expect you to spend all the money that you're paid, we also expect you to be financially viable. So if you've done the VCA, which I think all of you are working on it or have finished it, that's what we're looking for when we look at your bank statements. So we have to see you have enough income coming in to cover the cost of this program, even without our funds, because there are times, for a very good example, this week, for whatever reasons beyond our control, we're not able to make payments this week. So nobody in the state of Oklahoma, because of technical issues, is getting a payment this week. So we need to make sure that you guys understand that can happen, unfortunately, and you need to have adequate other sources of funding to pay for the program when that happens. So that's what we're looking for. So you'll want to include any kind of funding you have here. Daycares, you're going to have your private pay parent fees and your DHS if you're Title 20. If you're not on a program, obviously, yet you're not going to put anything here. If you receive any type of other federal funding, that's all your Title 20 schools, any other type of title money. And then any other type of income you may have. I mean, if you have, some of you might have to have personal loans or things, or lines of credit, things like that. Whatever you're using to get through and make your business viable right now, that's what we need to know, and you need to record it on here. And then you'll save your sources of income. And then it will calculate your profit loss. It will not let you submit this form if you're in a loss, because if you have a loss, you're considered to be not financially viable. So that's why it's kind of a catch-22, that we want you to spend all our money, but we also want you to not be losing money, because you need to be having other income coming from somewhere else. I hope that made sense. So as long as you don't have a red in the hole amount here, you can submit it and move on. If you do, you need to go look at reducing some of your cost, or make sure you've entered your income correctly. Any questions? Okay. So some of you, depending on the type of entity you are, you may have different paper documents listed here. Used to, we had it where you guys could go in there and upload them yourself, but it kind of got out of hand, so we just take care of it. So if you have a paper type document that needs to be uploaded, we will do it for you. So if you've sent me your DUNS, your certificate of authority and all that, It should be there. If there's a button there, you can see that I can't click that. If that's checked, that means it's been uploaded. So once you do all these forms and you submit them all, you also have to say if these have been submitted. So when you get ready to submit down here, and if you click it and say, oh, well, this document's not uploaded, you need to get it to me so we can get it uploaded. But if the check's there, then you're good. And you can just mark it. So much, you don't really need to worry about those because we pretty much tell you which ones you need before you get to that point. One thing I'd like to note here is that we do use this column here to help us out when we're going through your forms. So if something, once you submit and you say, okay, I'm ready for you to look at it and get me approved. If something's not right on one of these forms, we'll use this column here and we'll click it and say, oh, hold on, we need more information, or something's not quite right. And you should get an alert. I didn't show you where those alerts were. You may have already seen them, but I can show you here in a minute. But it'll send you something that says, hey, you need to fix this. And you can click on details and it says, oh, I need to answer question number 1. So you need to go back and redo it all. So if you log in and you see anything here like that, click on your details and it'll tell you what's wrong and what you need to fix. And I would suggest that, I think everybody in here I'm working with, but in the event that your application ever gets reassigned to someone else, you can always go down here and see, I'm just in a test one, remember, but you could go and see right now, most of you, it probably says me, Cassandra Riddell, and then your assigned field staff probably still says pending. But at some point you'll get reassigned to one of our other CACFP people, and you can go here and know who you need to reach out to. And that will be helpful. So once you get all these forms completed as best as you know how, and you have the required documents, you can click submit to CMP, and at that point it'll be ready for approval. Any questions on anything so far? I don't have any alerts in this one because it's just a fake account. It's just a test account, but if you go to home, like I mentioned before, this is where you'll see alerts. You may have already seen some pop up. I don't have any that I can even show you. But anything that's the status of something changes, like if it gets, we say we need more details on something, it'll send you an alert and it'll say it right here. So that's one way to keep up with it. Make sure you go into our resource library and you're utilizing all the resources we have available. Generally, if you need something or you have a question about something, you can find it here first. Yes, if you need a recording, please reach out to me and we can get it for you. Rates and reimbursement and all that, you can go to this page if you're ever curious about what the pay rate is that you'll get. But remember, it's a sliding scale. So the more free and reduced children you have, the more Title 20, the higher it's a sliding scale. So the higher you might be paid at a higher rate, if that makes sense. And then always remember, all of you have already found our training calendar. We've got a ton of trainings. So if you ever feel like, I'm not getting this, I need help, or we have the DCA training, many of you haven't finished that yet, it's going to be just like this, even less me talking, because there's not many slides to go through. It's just really to help you guys and answer any questions you may have. Before I move on to the multi-sided folks, any of you that are just single-sided daycare centers, do you have any questions? Okay, I'm going to move on to the multi-sided stuff. You're all welcome to stay, but if you have more than one site, you got to stay. We don't have to, but you should. Give me a second. I'm changing it again. Okay. Okay, so now you'll see that the magical site maintenance button is back. Site maintenance is where we maintain all your multiple sites if you have more than one. If you go into site maintenance and it's got some red and it says,
That's yourself. That's all.
sorry guys. If you go in here and there's no sites, you need to get me the site ad forms. If I haven't sent that to you yet, it's in the
And you sit and watch.
Guys, please keep your mics muted. So if you go into your site maintenance and you don't have anything, if I haven't sent you the forms yet, which I know some of you have sent so many forms, I know it's been hard to keep up with, here's a section just for you guys that have more than one site. And it gives you the instructions on how to add a new site. Print those off and look at it, because there's some steps you need to take. You got to do some pre-approval, you got to do the NDL and all that stuff. And it'll explain that to you. If you have questions, just let me know. But once you get all that done and you do the pre-approval and you do the site ad form, we'll get your site entered here. You'll notice that you can look at it, but your save button and everything's grayed out, because we don't want you guys to be able to alter anything, but we want you to be able to see if anything needs updated. So this is where we'll maintain your sites. Once your sites are in, and those of you that are, oh, I need to change this. Dang it, hold on. Sorry, guys. Okay. All right, so this is what a multi-sided sponsoring organization, or SO, as we call for short, application looks like. You'll see you have all the same forms. Now you're missing that one budget that we just went through. You got this new one, and we still have application participation, but you're going to see it's going to have all your sites. So if you have more than one site, you're going to have to do the same form for every site. Same information. The only differences on this one, there's two really. The name of the director, if this is auto-populated from our site maintenance, so if you come in here like, oh, it's not Kathy anymore, you'll have to contact us and let us know to update it in that site maintenance area, because if you remember, it's an area that only we can update in our office. The other difference is you only have one section of ethnic racial makeup, and it's just for the actual enrollment for those sites. And keep in mind, every year, you newbies, everything's blank right now. But the vast majority of all this information next year, when you do a renewal application, it's going to roll over and it's going to be already filled out for you. You're just going to update. So it'll go a lot quicker next year. Okay, so we're going to look at the sponsor application. It's much more lengthy than any other form that we've looked at. Because as a sponsor of multiple sites, you have more responsibilities. Okay, a lot of it, like I said, is going to be auto-populated, but it has some of the same questions as what the site applications do. Make sure you put your actual purpose or mission statement. It doesn't have to be a novel. It doesn't have to be, you know, we're not looking for any award-winning things here. Just tell us what your purpose is. We really have people that have just put an X there before, because as long as it has something in there, the page will save. But tell us what your purpose or your mission statement is. If you're a school or a nonprofit, you guys probably have one anyhow. Again, I don't think any of you are operating in any other states. For brand new applicants, if this is your first time to apply for the sponsor, you have to prove there's a need in your area. So explain what areas you're going to serve. If you're a school and you're just going to serve your school sites, that's all you need to put. If you are, I think that's about all we have that would be multi-sided. Here you'll list your number of sites that you have, whether it's centers or at risk. This is where you'll record your number of enrolled participants. This is asking for the total federal dollars spent in the prior fiscal year. So in another form, we ask what you received. We also want to know what you spent. And then list the months of your fiscal year. So if this is wrong here, you'll see I can't change it. If it's wrong, That comes from your business maintenance page, which you can change yourself. And so that's your fiscal year, like I said, not ours. Are all sites under the same sponsorship? So everyone in here that might be multi-sited, it's yes, so don't worry about that one. If you had a site that you were operating that has nothing to do with your business and you didn't own it, that would be unaffiliated, and we'd have other things that we'd have to have you do, but no one in here, that doesn't apply to anyone in here right now. And then, yes, you have to serve everyone the same. The most confusing part of this form is also going to be the administrative budget. Because it asks for your entire institution budget, and that's really what we're looking for, the same thing that I went on about that other one. We're looking to see, okay, what is your total, what does it cost to operate your total institution, your total business? And then what portion of it is the amounts that it costs to run just your CACFP program? So many of you might not have many of these things filled out. But I would encourage you to go in there and find as many of those expenses that you could. Just like we talked before, this is where you're going to go and enter your administrative. And remember, your administrative folks, we have a section B on this one too, much easier. But on section A, it's just your administrative and the people that are doing the office work, your accountant, your director, your what have you. That's where these people are going to go. And so it is a little confusing on how to enter it. But, oops, we're going to say Bob, and he's a director. And it wants to know how many hours, SO means sponsoring organization, that's just a multi-sided institution. How many hours are just, do you spend on the center portion of stuff or the school portion of stuff? And how many hours a year do you spend doing CACFP duties? So Bob, he spends, and we typically go, there's 2,080 hours in a year if you're working a 40-hour week. So that's kind of the easiest way to do it. So we're just going to say he does, you know, I don't know, that's kind of high. Hold on. We're going to say he spends 1,800 of his hours a year doing his other duties that have nothing to do with CACFP. And then he spends 280 hours doing what have you on CACFP. Let's make Bob, he's a monitor. Monitor is a person that goes out and does the site reviews. So we haven't gotten there yet. If you haven't had your multi-site training, you might not be very knowledgeable, but when you have more than one site, as a sponsor, you are required to go 3 times a year and just visit those sites and be like, yep, you're doing what you're doing, or nope, you're not. And the advantage of being a sponsor, like I know we have a center in here that's was one center and bringing on another site. The advantage is if you were to bring on 2 separate entities, you're going to be doing twice the amount of work. Whereas, although it seems like a real pain right now, once you get on as a sponsor, you only have to do 1 application, and as opposed to 2. It's only 1 approval process every year. And then you're only going to be up for review once every 2 to 3 years versus having multiple sites up for review every 2 to 3 years. So anyway, I told you I go off course. So Bob's going to do 1,800 hours of administrative for the center portion and 280 hours for CACFP monitoring. And he's going to make a really good living. You just put in whatever their salaries are. You have to pay taxes, calculate, and it does it for you. It'll say, okay, this is his total salary. These are the amount of hours he spends working on CACFP stuff. And then, like I told you, 2,080 is your total. It adds these up. So it says, okay, 13.462% of his time, and it applies that to his salary. That's the allowable cost now that you could use our funds to pay for Bob's, although he makes an incredible amount of money at this job. That's how much of you could pay for using our funds. Does that make sense? And just like with the other budget we looked at, just because it's in here doesn't necessarily mean you'll have those funds to pay for it, but you need to have it in here in case you do. So make sure you put anyone in here that would apply in those administrative costs. Same thing for your benefits. The one thing that's kind of quirky and weird about this one form, and I don't know why it's that way, all these other ones auto-populate whatever you have in the schedule. There's nothing in that one. So like whatever these all add up to be, it'll populate here, but these ones don't. So make sure you come back and, although you've got it over here, whatever all these add up to be, right here. Make sense? Like I stressed, I always, when I'm looking at these and I'm helping our folks fill them out, I can feel your pain because I used to be a sponsor and I know how tedious this form is, and it's not ideal and it's hard to make it perfect. But what I would encourage you is to make sure you find something anywhere you think you might have a cost. Fill it out. So materials, durable, materials, expendable. Durable is going to be any type of equipment that's going to last longer than 2 or 3 years generally, or a year even. Your materials expendable are going to be like office supplies, paper, ink, things like that. Any more, our auditors, we get audited by the state. And so most recently, one of the things they're requiring us now is when we come out and review you, they're making us take copies of everything that we look at, which is a lot. If we're looking at, all your receipts, all your applications, this and that, it's pretty, we don't like that we have to do it, but our auditors say we have to do it. And many times we're doing reviews still off site right now because of COVID. And so we've had to ask for folks to send us copies of things, which when you're talking 200 or 300 sheets of paper, it's too much to email. So people have been making copies and sending it to us. It would be reasonable that your cost for those ink and paper would go up because of that requirement now. And you can use our money to pay for those things. So this is where you would want to put them in there. If you take it to wherever Kinko's, I don't even think those exist anymore, but take it somewhere to have it printed, that is a reasonable cost. So think of all the things that you possibly could need to budget for, because right now it's just a projection. Next year, you'll have a better idea of what to base it on because you'll have a year or part of a year to kind of gauge it on. Utilities, office space, if you're renting or leasing a building, you can use a portion of that, or you can pay for a portion of that with CACFP funds. Now, you have to have a method for how you determine the amount, and most people, the easiest way would be by square footage. You can use, a percentage of all of the kitchen and a percentage of the rooms, or if you have a cafeteria. And if you need help with figuring that method, just let us know. So make sure that you're including everything here. If you own the facility, you can't pay yourself rent, so you wouldn't be able to put anything here. Something else I always look for is utilities and communications. You guys are on right now with me, so you've obviously got a light, you've got lights, you've got electricity, you also got internet, so that would go in communications. Make sure you're using those because you have to have those things to be able to get online and submit your claim. So that is an allowable cost. Any questions so far? The one thing is you have to have, there's not a lot of things we're going to tell you have to have in your budget. I mean, other than utilities and things we know you have, even though if you don't use our funds to pay for it, you still have that cost. So we still need to know what it costs you to operate your business. But we also, it's important if you want to use a portion of that, of our funds to pay for it, you figure out that percentage. But one thing you have to budget in, unless you have folks that are just volunteering their time and their expenses to do monitoring reviews. Like I said, every one of your sites has to be monitored 3 times a year. Now, if you're a school, if you're a center that's close by one another, the sites, you may not have any mileage or any travel expense, that's fine. But generally that's not the case. If you have one site in one town and one in another, you need to figure in the cost, what it costs you to get there and do those monitoring reviews 3 times a year. And that's where that would go. You can even budget in training expenses. You can use a portion of our money, like if you want to do a training, you can't pay for food or prizes or things, but you can pay for the materials and the workshop spaces if you want to host a training for all your folks, and if it's CACFP training. Most people don't have indirect costs, things like that. So it's the same thing with your administrative budget on this one as it was the other one, just a lot more spaces to fill in. And everyone has a schedule where you go in. So we'll say here, we'll say it's $10,000 a year. And after we took the square footage of our total square footage and divided it by the amount of square footage we consider to be areas that's used for CACFP would be 23%, calculates it, then it adds it. Now we have OG&E in there. And you'll see that it inserts it. It's got your total cost, the percentage, what's CACFP, and then this will be zeros until we come back and approve it. Part B is where you enter your food cost. That would be all your food and milk, any other food-related supplies, paper plates, cleaning supplies, things like that. Now we can't pay for all your paper towel and all your cleaning supplies because it's reasonable to believe that those things would be used for other reasons in your centers, but it could be a portion of it. The only difference here on this one, as the other smaller budget we looked at, this is where your food service labor would go, and you have to enter it. Bob's a cook too. You would have to enter it here individually. So this would be where you enter your teachers that serve meals, your janitor that maybe does the cleaning, you can include him in there too. That's where these will go. Part C is where you're going to record your income. Same thing here. Private pay fees, Title 20, any type of other funding. You're going to just do an average. We can help you figure out that amount. You need to put an amount here, and if you don't know what to put, we'll help you. Federal funding, any grants, all that, same thing as the other one that I went on and on about. Put in all your income. Don't leave anything out. Because the same thing here is you can't make a profit, but you still have to be a viable business. The one difference with sponsors, though, is we have the 15% rule. And that means you can use our money to pay for all these things up here, but you can't spend more than 15% of what you make on these costs. And I know that's really confusing because when you're filling this out, you have all these other different amounts. Like, it's okay that if we pay for, 100% of your travel, because all you travel for is monitoring reviews. But if you get paid $5,000 one month, 15% of that is only $750. So if your payment was $5,000 per month, and when you do your claim, it'll do the calculations, it'll show you. You can only use $750 of that money for that month to pay for these administrative costs up here that you're approved to use that money for. And so it gets confusing that it's like, well, is it 15% or is it whatever percent I put in here? You can, as long as you have a reason or a method for the percentages you put up here, that's fine. But at the end of the day, when you get your payment, whatever 15% of that is that you're paid is all you can use to pay for those things other than food and food-related costs. Does that make sense? So when you go to do this, it'll either say, it'll auto calculate and tell you like, I'm gonna take this out. So see, I took that really high amount out and I've taken away a lot of my income. And so now I'm not in compliance because I'm not making enough anyway to even cover anything. So the point of that was, as long as you have enough in your income to support 15% of whatever this is up here, you'll be in compliance. That makes sense? If you're filling it out and you get confused and it doesn't make sense and you can't get it to say yes, just reach out to me. We'll get it worked out. And then the same thing here, it's going to figure your profit loss. You can't have a loss. So if you've got a loss, you got to go and look at decreasing your expenditures or increasing your income. Part F, we don't have any family daycare home sponsors in here, so you can't, it doesn't apply to you. You can't even fill it out if you want. Then you go to page 2 after the dreaded budget. This is not a hard page. It's just, you need to be very detailed in your responses. And if you go to fill it out right now and you don't know what your answers should be, you need to wait until you go to the multi-sided sponsoring training and you'll have a better idea. Because you've really got to have some policies and procedures on things. And chances are you do, you just don't have them written down. So this section A is talking about record collection and fund disbursement. We need to know how and when you're collecting your family and income size applications, the income applications. Some of you, if you're at risk, you don't do that. So you can just put an A, you don't do that, but 99% of you guys in here have to collect the income applications. And just tell us, how do you do that? Do you do it upon enrollment? And then every year, every July when we release the new one, if you don't know that, or if you don't even know how to answer yet, don't answer it. But just know that it has to be done annually and it has to be done when the child's enrolled. So tell us where your records will be maintained and who has access to them. If you've done the VCA or in the process of it, this should mirror what you put on there. So basically, if we were to show up at your facility, we need to know who can get to the records and where they are if you're not there, because your records have to be available at all times. In the event that we show up, say you've been on the program for, however many months in the year, say you're approved and you've been claiming, and we come out in September. If your records aren't there or they're not readily available, we have the rights to reclaim all that money you've been paid and ask for it back, just because you didn't have your records available. So make sure you've got them up to date and on site. And this is where you tell us how you're keeping those and where. Describe your accounting system used. That was also something you answered in your VCA or need to answer in your VCA. If you don't have an actual system like QuickBooks or Brightwheel or ProCare, if you just do a spreadsheet, that's fine. Just tell us, how are you maintaining your records? How do you know that what you are paid is being spent? If you're writing it down on a piece of notebook paper every month, I don't care. As long as we show up and it's on that piece of notebook paper, you're good. This one probably doesn't apply to anyone. And so your correct response to this would be that you don't pay your sites. So we have some sponsors who they have sites, mostly it's family daycare homes. So they're all responsible for buying their own food, feeding their own meals, and then you turn in a claim and then the sponsor turns the claim into us and we pay the sponsor, and the sponsor is responsible for paying those individuals or those sites within 5 days, an actual payment, the full reimbursement amount that we paid. I don't think that's what anybody in here is doing if you're multi-sided. Most of you guys are providing the food, you're incurring all the charges as a business and providing what the sites need. Therefore, the reimbursement just goes back to your main account and it's absorbed that way. So if that's the case, you just need to respond like, we don't make payments to our sites. We pay for all the costs that are involved, every expense involved with CCFP, and it's paid into one account and the expenses come out of the same account. Does that make sense? We really don't have a lot of center sites that do it that way. Okay, you have an ethnic and racial breakdown section. That's why you didn't have 2 on the side applications. So on your side applications, we have actual enrollment. And then on this one, we have actual enrollment and the big potential one too. So theoretically, on this first top section of section B of your ethnic racial on this application. All these should add up to be the total of what you entered on the site applications. Someday we're going to have it where it'll auto-populate, but we're not there yet. So if your grand total of everyone and all your sites is 100, these two things need to add up to be 100, and these 5 things need to add up to be 100 because everyone has an ethnicity and a race. And then you kind of have to tell how you collected that information, whether it was reported or just observation. And then the second part of this is the potential area. Same thing as before. You can go on the census, you can go on frac.org, frac.org, and look it up, which is kind of tedious. The easiest way would be to contact your local school or us, and we can get this for you. Section C goes talking about your monitoring. And like I said, if you don't have any procedures yet, or you don't know how to answer, and you haven't had that monitoring or the multi-sided training yet, just hold off. But you have to describe your procedure. You have to have procedures for conducting pre-approval visits. So those of you that are coming on new, you have to, as silly as it sounds, you have to go and approve your own sites. And then you have to also have procedures for how any future ones would be conducted. And it would not be acceptable to say, we're not going to take any more sites, because you never know what could happen. And also USDA says you have to have a procedure for in the event you add a new site. It is possible that we have sponsors that they came on as their own sponsor just to do their own sites, but we may have a center that's near your area that's really struggling, that's not capable, and they need to be on the program, but they're just not administratively capable. We could come to a sponsor and ask them like, hey, would you be willing to take this on as a site? And so if that were to happen, you don't have to, but if it did, you would need to have a procedure for how you go and conduct your pre-approvals. All of your sites have to be reviewed. Their first review when they come on brand new. So if you're brand new, all your sites within the first 4 weeks have to have a review, and the pre-approval doesn't count as that. So once you get approved and we get you going, just know you've got 4 weeks, 28 days technically, to get out there and do a review. We have a simple little form that is in the multi-sided section of the resource library that you fill out. Easy peasy. But you do have to do 3 a year. And you can do 2 different methods. You have to choose one or the other. You can do 1 announced and 2 unannounced, or you can do an averaging. So most of you, we've got 2 or 3 sites on the folks that are in here that are multi-sided. Most of our folks just do the 1 announced, 2 unannounced. It's just easier than having to average it. But if you ever had like a problem child site that needs more attention than another, you could switch it to averaging, to where you could do, if you only have 2 sites, you got to have a total of 6. You could do 4 at one and 2 at the other. It's easier just to say you're going to do this one though, in my opinion. It is required that you ensure that the timing of your unannounced reviews are unpredictable. And that's kind of hard how to put into words. You can't just say, we're going to make sure they're unpredictable. How? Make sure that you're not going the same week, of the month every 3 months apart. Just be explicit on, you'll make sure that it's a different day and a different meal time and a different week of the month every time you do the review, because it can get predictable. I mean, I used to be with a sponsor. It was pretty easy to get in that rut. The first part of the month, you always worked on your claims and all that. And then the second half of the month, you focused on going out and doing some reviews. They kind of tend to predict that. So just write something up. Just tell us how you're going to make sure you can pop in and they don't know you're coming. And then describe your recruitment policy and procedures. This, like I said, you may not want to take on any new sites, but you still have to have a policy and a procedure in the event that you do. That's what I was talking about before. So you can just state that if you're ever approached by a site that needs help, this is what you would do, or something to that effect. And then you have to comply with these requirements. Kind of silly but yes, you have to say yes here. This section here is about your staffing ratio. So there's a very specific number of full-time employees, FTE, that you have to be able to monitor the amount of sites you have. So it all depends on whether they're metro or rural, and you have to go and enter them in here yourself. And our system automatically determines whether they're metro or rural. So for your metro ones, you can see that there's a 75 limit versus a 60 per person limit. So that means if you have a monitor, one monitor, and all you have is rural sites, they couldn't have more than 60 assigned to them. I know that doesn't apply to anybody in here. You guys only have 2 or 3. So really you just only need one person. So I'm kind of going on a tangent here, but you'll see, say there's 2 metro ones here. You only need 0.027 of a full-time employee to meet those, to meet that. And so it tells you how many you need to have to be able to have enough people to monitor these folks. And then down here, you go and list who is responsible for doing those. And you can see here that I've got Cassie and Edgar listed. And we've got way more than enough time. We've got 0.75 available, but we only needed this much. So that's the whole point of this. Most of you are just going to probably have one person listed here, and that's going to be way more than enough. One thing to keep in mind though, the person listed here, if they are receiving a salary, you need to make sure you have them in the salary and you've got their monitoring hours listed on that section like I showed you. Remember how Bob did this many hours of this and 280 hours of monitoring? Make sure that those are congruent. So here you report the number of hours per week. The other one, it was per year. Like I said, it's going to be pretty easy for those of you in here that are multi-sided because you don't have but 2 or 3, so you just need one person. But make sure the person you have listed here is the person really doing the on-site reviews, because we will look for that. And if it were to ever change, you need to come back and update this. One thing though, COVID has kind of turned everything upside down. We do have a waiver available that will allow you to do an off-site review. They're kind of a pain because you really do have to collect all that information and still look at the same stuff you would normally, but I don't think many of you would have a problem going on site to your own sites right now. But if you feel like you need the waiver, just let me know. Section D talks about the training that's required. So you, as your administrative duties, need to have training, but you also need to train your people that have anything to do with CACFP, like I talked before. Now, they don't have to come. You can register anybody you want in your account for any of our trainings. You can sign anybody up, and that'd be great. But you can also go on to the resource library and download any of our training. We have almost all our training on there, if I'm not mistaken. And you can use that to train your own people at a staff meeting. And these are the things that you have to go over. And it doesn't have to be super lengthy. We don't tell you how long it has to be. We just tell you, you got to train them on these things here. And then tell us what your training policies will be for the current fiscal year. So say we will do it at staff meeting every July. I don't know, I'm just making stuff up. Just tell us how you plan to do it. And then who the person's position, not their name. So is it the owner? Is it the director? Who's going to do the training? I think that was also asked in the BCA. And that's the end of that form. Save, submit. One thing I'd like to point out, this form kind of has a bug, not kind of, it has a bug in it. If ever you're coming to this form to look around and you're not changing anything, but you say, oh, I want to see what I have on page 2. If you click save and continue, it will, if it's an approved form, it will unapprove it. And then you'll have to get it reapproved. So make sure if you're coming to this page and you just need to go see what's on page 2, click next page without saving. I just try to like to point that out. So many times some folks have come in here and click that and then it's unapproved it. And then you go to try to claim and then you can't. Okay, so I know I just dumped a whole bunch of information on you guys. But do anybody have any questions on the sponsor application? It's just a quick overview of the additional requirements that a sponsor has, and the multi-sided training is really going to help you. But as far as paperwork goes and things like that, those requirements, you still have to keep, you know, your same meal count worksheets and menus and all that for each site like you would any other site. As a sponsor, there are some additional paper documents that you have to have. We do ask for job descriptions. So we didn't get the job descriptions in the VCA. That might be something we start doing though. But if you don't have job descriptions for those that have responsibilities in the CCFP, go ahead and write some up. It doesn't have to be professional. And if you need examples, resource library, they are kind of stuck in a weird place because family daycare home sponsors have to have one too. But here you can go in any kind of policy and procedures that you need. You can use what we've already created and just kind of tailor it to your own thing. Pre-approval evaluation form. We provide that form for you and we just upload our own. But if you create any forms of ours, that's fine. You can do that as long as it has at least what ours has, but it needs to be approved by our office or your consultant. So if you want to create any type of form that makes it easier for you to do anything, that's perfectly okay, but it's got to be as good as or better than ours. And it needs to be approved. And then same thing with that one, once you get done with all these forms, the one difference on this one is you can go ahead and submit your whole application down here if you don't have all these filled out. So if you have sites that aren't quite approved yet and you've only done one of two, you can go ahead and submit it if you need. And then you submit to CMP and wait for approval. Like I said, I would really encourage you guys to go into our resource library. Here's our training manual. When we get a little bit closer to time for your consultant to come out and do your pre-approval visit, we will give you a hard copy of the manual because there's several things that we send out with that. But for the time being, you're welcome to print that here. If there's any of you that are still having trouble with DUNS number, here's the instructions on how to do that. We've got all kinds of stuff in here, all kinds of training. Here's all of our training slides. So like I said, if you want to do training yourself on your folks on how to do any of these things, it's here. That's all I really have to ramble on about at this point. Does anybody have any questions specifically about their application or anything else that they're having trouble with?
And what is your email address?
My email address is most of you have been getting emails from me already harassing you for all kinds of stuff. That's all I have. You're welcome to go ahead and log off. I'll stay on for a couple minutes in case anyone has any questions. You have my email. Reach out to me if you need anything, and I look forward to you guys getting your trainings finished up and we can get you approved and going.
Thank you.
Hey, Cassie, I just have one quick question, if you've got just a moment.
Sure, go ahead.
Are you the person we would work with for the National Food and Lunch Program as well, or would that be a different department?
Well, we're all in the same office and I'm familiar with it, but it depends on what you're needing.
Well, I'm here today with Stephanie and Elizabeth as a part of Safe Haven Child Development Center, which does use CACFP, but we also have a not-for-profit K through 12 school that wouldn't be CACFP, they would be NFLP. So I'm starting the application process for the NFLP stuff as well. And so I'm just—
Is it a private school?
Yes.
So private schools are, here we only do public institutions
Okay.
with the State Department. So DHS handles the private schools on the NSLP. Do you have
Okay.
a contact over there for that person?
I was just given one. I was told to contact the commodity department.
That's a good place to start. Yeah. Gina.
Yeah, I
Ask,
didn't. Okay.
yeah, ask for Gina. She can help you.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. So yeah, we don't get certificates out anymore really for trainings. I will go and you'll get credit in your account. So I'll keep up with what, who's done what. No worries on that. Anything else? All right, well, I'm logging off. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.